Welcome to Boroughs Burbs with hosts John Engel and Roberto Cabrera. Over the next hour, you're going to learn some insider knowledge that will help you overcome and strategize in the cutthroat world of real estate. Now, here are your hosts, John and Roberto.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs. This is episode 96, and this is the Westport Show. I'm very excited indeed, to have the economist and the storyteller. I know. Economist, really? Yes, that's how the first selectman of Westport described herself. She's not a politician. She just happens to be a successful politician. She's an economist. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do a show on Westport, is how does she keep it running like a Swiss watch? The other person I want to talk to is the author and owner of the 06880, which is the must-read, do I say muckraking? I don't know. Provocative, yes. We'll go with provocative journalism that if you live in Westport, if you care about Westport at all, you have to dial into the 06880 daily. Otherwise, you're just, out of touch. I also want to bring up Amy Cuccio. She works with me. She lives in the Westport area. She's a Westporter. And I want to bring in Ann Santa Maria, also a Westporter. I know you're right over the border in Weston, but that counts too. And she's just joining us now, Pam Toner, who it was Pam's idea to have the Westport show. And she says, if Westport is really number one in Connecticut, and Westporters think Westport is number one in Connecticut, then you have to do a show directed at Westport. So with that, and before I begin, I just want to thank our sponsor, Grace Farms, which has an 80-acre campus here in New Canaan. They've got the world-famous architecture of the River Building. And I want everybody to go to the River Building and have tea with Frank in the tea house, learn about their mission, and find out that they're not just about architecture. They're not just about art. They're not just about sustainable development and the building trades. They're not just about, they're not just about environmental, they're about so many things. So I want everybody to go to gracefarms.org and check out their website. And then I want you to go have some tea in the tea house with Frank. And with that, my very, very casual sponsor announcement, we can now move into the show. And I think I'll start with Dan Woog, author of the 06880. What is the 06880? What does that mean?
Well, it's our zip code, but the tagline is where Westport meets the world. So several times a day, I write about anything having to do with our town, people, politics, looks back, trends, businesses, bad parking. If it has anything to do with 06880, you can read about it on 06880.org.
That's very specific, bad parking. So meaning I'm going to read this and I'm going to recognize my neighbors and I'm going to see my favorite restaurants and I'm going to see bad behavior and you're going to call people out on it.
Yeah, there's much more good behavior than bad, but no place is perfect. And parking here and driving just sucks.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you and ask you for some of your top 10 lists. And Jen, would you introduce yourself to my partner? Oh, I forgot to even introduce him. My partner, Roberto Cabrera, the city mouse, although he doesn't look like he's in the city today. And would you tell him, what does he need to know about Westport? And why are we doing a show on Westport?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And John and Roberto, thank you for having me. What does everybody need to know about Westport? Westport is the best town in the state of Connecticut. That's what you need to know about Westport.
That's it?
Well, we have, in my opinion, the most beautiful beaches. We have a majestic Saugatuck River that runs right through the center of our town. We have wonderful recreational facilities. We have the state's best school system. Some would say one of the best school systems in the country. And I would also say we have the best residents. Engaged, thoughtful, smart, awesome residents.
So I'm going to direct my next remark to Roberto. Roberto, if you're coming from New York City, your perspective is probably on the train line or I-95. And when you hit Connecticut, the first thing you do is you hit Greenwich, and you probably would explore Greenwich, and you've heard of Greenwich. Greenwich is a town of 60,000 people, and it covers, I think, something like 60 square miles, maybe 40 square miles. It's an enormous place. And so if you said Greenwich is not for me and you kept going, the next place you'd reach would be Stamford, a city, then Darien, a town, 20,000 people. And you would probably consider Darien for a lot of the same reasons Jen mentioned. Then you'd hit Norwalk, another city, and then you'd hit Westport. And then you'd probably decide to yourself, okay, where do I want to settle? Greenwich, Darien, or Westport? Those are the three towns. And Greenwich is a very, very large town. Some would call it a city. Is this about what you know about Connecticut coming from New York, Roberto?
Yeah, more or less. And my question would be is if I've gone all the way to Westport, what I would get to Westport and I'd say, this is beautiful, but if I'm going to come here, what are my other options? Is like, what's Westport competing with? Like, I don't think Westport's necessarily competing with New Canaan and Darien, right? It's a little bit further out. It's a little bit smaller. It's more quaint, shall we say? And I'm just curious, can you commute from there? Some people do, but I would imagine the further you go out, the fewer commuters you actually have. So does the city become inaccessible to you?
I wouldn't call it quaint. I would say there's a lot of culture there too that I think Jen hasn't talked about. So much culture. Obviously, there are some high-profile residents there and former residents that were high-profile, like Paul Newman and a few others. But Jen, you might want to add to that on the culture aspect too.
Thank you. I'd be happy to add to the list of reasons why I think it's the best town in the state. Yes, we have a wonderful, vibrant arts and cultural community here in Westport. We have a long history that Dan can fill you in on, having lived here all his life, of being an arts and cultural hub. We also have a really vibrant downtown and Main Street. We have an award-winning library that adds to the cultural landscape here in Westport. So, and many, many organizations, local organizations, whether it be MoCA, whether it be the Westport Country Playhouse, whether it be the Levitt Pavilion, we are truly a destination when it comes to the arts and culture, for sure.
Now, when he said quaint, I think Meredith's right. I don't think it's quaint. Darien's 20,000 people. New Canaan's 20,000 people. I think Westport's 25,000 people. Is that about right?
It's actually just slightly under 30,000. So around 28,000 people.
Okay, 28,000 people. So it's large enough to not only have movie theaters, but also the Playhouse that we've heard a little bit about. Dan, tell me about the Playhouse and why does it matter?
It matters because it plays a foundational role in theatrical history in America. It was opened in 1931 in an old tannery. Lawrence Langner, who had been responsible for groundbreaking plays on Broadway, wanted a summer place near his home in Weston. And for 90 years, it's provided that role. I mean, the people who have been on the stage, from Henry Fonda and Jane Fonda, James Earl Jones, Paul Newman, it was where Oklahoma got a start when Richard Rodgers came to see a show and got the idea for Oklahoma. And it was just it defined summer stock theater for many, many years.
I don't know if you can see those pictures, Roberto, but it's not just a cute little spot with 100 seats. It was a major theater in the 30s, and then Paul Newman was instrumental in having it renovated, multi-million-dollar, tens of millions of dollars renovation. So it is now a not only a community playhouse, but it's a state-of-the-art playhouse. Is that about right?
Paul and Joanne Woodward, his wife. She was
Paul and Joanne.
Huge.
So one of the
35,000 is far larger than what I thought it was. I thought it was more like 20,000.
Yeah, if you're not doing Broadway, it's like the next stop east. You know, when you leave New York, it's the next big deal once you leave Broadway. And a lot of places.
If I'm going to come as far as Westport, what else am I considering as a buyer out there? That's what I want to understand.
Do I have a realtor who wants to dive into that? When your customers
I
come
will.
out from New York City and they say, I'm considering Westport, are they also looking for the surrounding towns, Anne, Amy, of Southport,
Mhm.
Weston, because they want to shop and they want to be part of the Westport scene, but they want to be close to Westport? Or are they also considering the other towns that have great schools throughout Fairfield County, or the other towns within an hour commute in Fairfield County?
I mean,
Are they
I think, yeah, sorry, John. I think a good portion of them aren't really aware of some of the surroundings. Fairfield's a bigger town, so they're aware of that just further, a little further on the train line. But a lot of them come to Westport because they want Westport. But some of them turn and will go to Weston, where I am, and they'll get, they won't pay as much. They'll pay more taxes. They'll get more land. And if you can be in a commutable spot there, or Wilton, you can be in a commutable spot there, and Fairfield as well. But I think some of them are dead set on Westport, but if they're priced out, then they start looking beyond.
John,
Are the taxes in Westport higher than they are in Darien and New Canaan?
Not anymore. Go ahead, Jen. Why don't you take that? I think that Westport was in 4th place in terms of the 4th lowest taxes. And then Jen took over. And then what happened, Jen?
Well, I have to give some serious credit to my predecessor, Jim Marpy, on this issue as well. But I'm just looking at a little sheet of paper here, so excuse my readers. Westport sits, our mill rate as of July 1st sits at 1835. New Canaan's at 1894. But Greenwich is at 11.4, and excuse me, Darien is at 1761. So we are the 3rd lowest in our surrounding area.
So it used to be 4th place
We
with
used to be
something
fourth.
like around 20, and you've actually gotten that number down to 18.35, whereas New Canaan only a couple of years ago was at 16 and has gone to 18. And so now you're squarely in 3rd place and New Canaan's in 4th place.
We are squarely in 3rd place.
How have you done that? Like, how does that happen in your state?
So it's not easy, because really the revenue that we collect is property locally, is property tax only. So part of the secret sauce is to make sure that your grand list, so the value of the properties in your community, continue to rise. And we only do a reval on our property in the state of Connecticut every 5 years. Every 5 years is sort of a gentle reval, and then every 10 years you do a little bit more in-depth revaluation. And so it really means that your local economy, and specifically improvements to people's property, needs to be occurring on a regular basis to keep that grand list rising. So that's one issue. And we continue to have our grand list. This year, our grand list rose by 1.9%, which is pretty bullish. Last year, it rose by about 2.4%, which is obviously very bullish. And that's all in a year that is not a revaluation year for us.
Let me break that down for you, Roberto. If the value of all taxable real estate, the grand list, is only going up 2%, because we used to wring our hands over this on the town council as well. If the grand list taxable base is only going up 2%, but your school contracts and the cost of providing services and inflation in the good old days was only going up 3% a year, or 4% maybe on your labor contracts, then you said, okay, I guess my mill rate is going to creep up unless housing prices go up substantially, and therefore I can keep it flat.
Yeah.
Westport actually lowered theirs from 20 down to 18 in the last 10 years, and pretty incredible. Would you say that, so your mill rate has come down, but would you say that the inflation of what it costs to run Westport has gone up by about 3% a year in each of the last 10 years?
I think that's I think that's about a fair number, John. I would agree with you. I think also part of the secret sauce here that I do talk about regularly is making sure that we have a robust percentage of our grand list that is associated with commercial property. And we do have that here in Westport. And it is truly part of the secret sauce of making sure we can keep our mill rate competitive and steady. And so I'm going to give you round numbers, but somewhere between 12 and 15% of our grand list is commercial property. And that's a really important component of how we can keep the mill rate, like I said, competitive and stable.
So that's incredibly important because it's a key difference between Westport with 30,000 people with a substantial commercial base versus, say, New Canaan, a village off of the Post Road, off of I-95, that doesn't have some of the commercial opportunities. So we have John Hannigan on the call. He is a commercial realtor in Westport. Are you in Westport, John?
Well, we're the company's Choice Peterson. I co-founded it many years ago. We're a Norwalk-based firm, but ironically, we just finished a survey of Westport, the 20 largest office buildings, which comprise about 1 million square feet of space. And the availability rate is just over 14%, which is very, very low. It's one of the lowest in all of Fairfield County. And so the commercial market is more of a boutique market in Westport than, say, Norwalk and Stamford. And companies have been flocking there, from law firms to accounting firms. But I would say one of the primary drivers is financial service firms over there. So, and just, on an availability level, when people are moving from the city, sometimes they own a company. We're marketing 315 Post Road West, which is a 34,000 square foot building for sale that also has available space. So a company can come and occupy space, essentially pay their own rent to themselves, and own a spectacular building in Westport.
So John, can I ask a question of our commercial real estate expert here? So when companies are making the decision to come to Westport, we have a decent idea of why residents are making decisions, but why would a company come here instead of Norwalk?
Yeah, so I think it's the charm of Westport. Again, they're not these big commercial buildings, which companies seem to be shying away from in suburban markets. In Stamford, yes, but Greenwich has a low availability rate, as does Darien and Westport. Second is commutability. Westport's a lot easier to get to from the Trumbolls and Sheltons of the world, even Wilton and Norwalk. And the rates are not low. I mean, the rental rates are higher in Westport than in Norwalk, but people generally live nearby that own these companies because they're smaller companies. And I think there's more stability in having multiple tenants in buildings rather than a big one and then they leave and there's a huge vacancy.
You know what I'm hearing, Roberto? That Westport's got some unique advantages over all of those other towns. If I was the mayor of Greenwich, for instance, I'd say, yeah, it's a real problem that I don't have any lower cost options around me. But John just said, yeah, if you are wealthy enough to live in Westport, then you live in Westport and you run your business in Westport. But can you get workers who have less than, say, a half-hour commute within a 10-mile radius of Westport? And the answer is yes. I don't think that the mayor of Greenwich can bring in, has, shall we say, affordable housing options within a half hour of him. It's a big problem. You have a place out in the Hamptons. It's a big problem. Where do you get your workers? Where do you get your food service workers? Where do you get, a lot of the blue collar labor? Greenwich has that problem. Hamptons have that problem. Westport is uniquely located where they are close enough to New York City to commute, and yet close enough to the rest of the state where they can bring in workers and get things done.
I would think that Greenwich gets a lot of their people coming in from Westchester. There are some reversal commuting because it's not as far as Westport from the city, for example. And you've got Stamford that could be a source for staffing.
What is the commute to New York City from Westport, approximately?
It's over an hour, about an hour 20 into Grand Central.
But here's an interesting point. It used to be for decades that people commuted into New York 5 times a week, Monday through Friday. That was their life. Since the pandemic, that has changed. The people who do go in only go in twice a week. They are working from home. They've got a satellite office in Westport in one of these office buildings. They are much more involved in the community than they used to be. And that's been a game changer. All of a sudden, you don't need to think about your commuting time when you're looking for a house as much as you used to.
And maybe this is a good opportunity for me to mention one of our latest economic development strategies is an initiative called Startup Westport, where we have declared it as our goal to become the tech startup entrepreneurial hub of Connecticut. What we have found, as Dan just mentioned, we have found with a lot of the new residents that have come here, we have found lots and lots of tech expertise, whether it be executives, whether it be funders, whether it be true expertise in the tech world in one way, shape, or form. And because they don't need to commute into the city every day, they are staying here in Westport, and they're looking for kind of an ecosystem to meet, to network, to grow their business, to figure out how to fund their business, to figure out, definitely to find future employees. So we have had 2 events so far, just in the first 6 months of this year. The last event drew over 150 people in the tech business to our June event, and it's unbelievable. And like Dan said, and we knew the game changer was people are not commuting 5 days a week anymore. So we knew if we kind of tried to create this ecosystem here, that more and more people who are involved in the tech industry would choose Westport to live and to work, and that's our goal.
Have you had a measurable increase in population since the pandemic?
It's really hard to do that without hardcore census data.
Sure.
But yes, we do believe we have, on a net basis, and I can't give you exact numbers, but that we have the largest influx of new residents in the state. So on a net basis.
It's interesting because in Manhattan, I have encountered over the last several weeks, I've encountered so many people, and their schedule is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the city. Yep. So they're actually spending more of the year, 4 days of the week outside of the city. So it's really a primary residence has fleeted Manhattan and is now in places like Westport. So I would imagine that would drastically increase your population.
We absolutely see, and we see it at our 2 commuter train stations as well, that it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday commuting town now. and Monday and Friday, many people are here. And yes, I mean, the only constraint we have is we, really only have, Westport is very fully developed. And so to the extent that we have new homes going up, it's usually a redevelopment of a plot of land. It's not just sort of a brand new home on a vacant piece of property. So, we are definitely constrained when it comes to space. We have, so that is an issue from a standpoint of bringing in all sorts of, on a net basis, thousands of new residents. I don't think we're in the position to do that. We just don't have the space to build lots of new housing.
Although it's really interesting, Jen, that all these new residents, all of whom came from Manhattan or Brooklyn.
Yep.
They love the space. I mean, they've got an acre, they've got a yard, they've got bedrooms for all their kids. It is a revelation for them.
Indeed, you're totally right, Dan.
Jen,
So can we talk about it? Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I was going to ask, with the increase in population in the town of Westport, are you starting to see a strain on the school systems at all?
So I'm not the superintendent of schools, so I'll speak just with my first select woman's hat on. But what I will tell you, Amy, is that our enrollment is up, I believe, 12% since the pandemic, which is the largest enrollment increase in our DERG, which is the Connecticut school system way of saying kind of our peer group around here in mostly in Fairfield County. And so we are seeing an increase in enrollment. And will I characterize it as a problem? No, I would not. But we absolutely are seeing an increase in enrollment, unlike a lot of our neighboring towns. And I'll tell you where else we see it. And Dan can attest to this as well. We have all sorts of youth sports programs, just like any other town around. We have all sorts of youth arts programs, and all of our youth programs, regardless of what you want to get into, as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, are just all oversubscribed.
Jen, do you have a sense, Jen, of how many students, what percentage go to private schools, not go to the public schools?
I can give you a historic number on that because I used to sit on the Board of Education. And so it was always just slightly under 10% historically. I don't know, in fairness, I don't know if that's where it still sits. Dan, do you have any idea on that by chance?
What I hear anecdotally is that we have far fewer students going to private schools, and there are, 2 great private schools in Westport, Greens Farms Academy and Pierpoint, but the percentage of kids who go there is far lower than in Greenwich, certainly.
That's right.
I think New Canaan and Darien as well.
That's correct. We have always stood at lower percentage, kind of hovering 9–10%.
So if you're 30,000 and Darien and New Canaan are 20,000, I know that they have school systems with about 4,200. Is it fair to say you have about 6,000 people in your school, in your entire school system that you educate?
Closer to 5,500, I think, is where we sit. 5,600 kids.
Okay, and the budget, your budget, 75% of that is schools. 70?
Slightly under 70, 68-ish%. 60, yes.
And probably one of the biggest draws, is that true, Amy and Pam? One of the biggest draws for people choosing Westport is the quality of education, and it's just not great this year. It's been great for decades, right? It's one of the biggest draws. People move to Westport, New Canaan, Darien.
Right.
Yeah,
and the beach.
I would say that.
So Pam, Amy, and Ann, can we talk about inventory and how it's changed from, we always go back to John's example of how many houses he had for sale in New Canaan and how few he has now. It was like 180 and now it's like 70. What was the numbers, John?
So I'm going to pull up, I'm going to share a screen, but we're probably at 40% of what we had only a few years ago. right now we're looking at the Westport June numbers. And the most surprising statistic on the entire page is that year to date through the first half, the median price is 2.1 and the average price is 2.477 in Westport. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars higher than it was in 2019, which is what's on the page now. June 2019, that was $1.3 million.
Wow.
So to go,
Right.
so whereas a lot of people have talked about a 20% increase, 25%, 30% increase, we've got what, a doubling of the year-to-date average and median sale price in Westport.
Wow.
That's incredible. Darien, just to contrast it, in 2019 was also at $1.2 million, $1.4 million. And Darien is now showing that they've had a year-to-date average sales price of 2.7, which is very much like Westport, and a median of 1.9, very much like Westport. So Darien is experiencing many of the same challenges of a housing market that's in effect doubled in the last 4 years, or at
But
least for the
primarily
average
driven,
price.
primarily driven because of a contraction in inventory, right? So
Right.
I'm curious as to what that looks like numbers wise.
So it says here in June, you have inventory of 104 houses for sale. And a year ago, it was 136. And if we go back to 2019, the last
Oh my
year of maybe
goodness.
normalcy, it was 414 and 411 in
Wow.
2018. So to go from 410
Wow.
to
It's a quarter.
100, we're at 25%.
That's way worse than you in New Canaan.
And Westport's down to about 85 homes as we speak today. So it's dropped even from those June statistics.
That's
July's falling
tough.
off, as typically does.
And the properties that are on the market, are they older things that need work, or because I'm assuming anything that's new that comes on, it's just gone.
I mean, it's a variety, like any town. You do have some fixer uppers. You've got a lot of new construction. It varies.
But I think what happens though is Westport to New Yorkers is a well-known town. People always start in Westport, but it's between the inventory limitations and the price points. That's where people start to then look at different communities. But when they even live here, they're always drawn to Westport between the Playhouse, Levitt Pavilion, and all the other amenities that Westport has.
So you weren't on the call earlier. That was my question. If not Westport, where?
Then they
You
start
said they
branching
started Westport.
Weston, Easton,
Okay.
Fairfield, Southport, and even
Yeah.
venture over to New Canaan if they've started in Westport.
You're really ready to start slumming it.
They start slumming in New Canaan. Exactly.
But I don't think people realize when they're leaving the city how much variety is out here and how many choices. But I think Westport's a great place to start, and if you can stay there, it's even better for everybody.
I think it's really interesting, Jen, that that the historical strength is a school system and a commute to the city. And what you're talking about, if I hear you correctly, is pivoting and saying we're going to actually be an incubator. And as we move further into the 21st century, we're not going to rely on everybody commuting to the city, raising a family out here, sending the kids to school and commuting to the city. We're going to start to try and incubate businesses right here in Westport. And that's a change. And we're going to take advantage of the fact that we have, I think John Hannigan said, how many, million square foot, 1 million feet of office space. And that if you're a business that needs to expand, we probably have an option for you. And if you need to contract, we probably have an option for you. And especially with a 14% vacancy, which is lower than most, but it means that you probably have the opportunity to expand your business and find space in the local area if you look hard enough. So I think it represents a change, a pivot. A lot of towns look to tourism as their primary economy, driver of the economy. We've always looked to schools, and now we're looking to tech. And I think that's fascinating.
as an economist, I understand that everything is cyclical, right? But certain things are less cyclical. Okay. And so to me, I feel very strongly as the leader of this town that anything I can do from an operational standpoint and from a standpoint of building out for the future, anything I can do to ensure that the cycles, the economic cycles are more muted here locally for us, and that we don't have quite the peaks and troughs that that maybe other communities will have. I view that as part of my job. And I do think diversifying our commercial base, making sure office space stays full, not just relying on the absolute wonderful retail and restaurant scene that we have, which we do have, but that's very cyclical. And making sure that we have a diversification of our commercial base is just really important. And especially if we can get people to invest in this community, not only to live here, but to work here, to do both. Mm-hmm. That is a winner. It's just a winner for everybody, because they're even, to Dan's point, they're even more vested than in Westport in multiple angles. And so from multiple angles and for multiple reasons, and that just makes for even a better community and better engagement. And so, yeah.
Then how do you bring in people from the outside? New Canaan, for example, has a tourism and economic tourism kind of committee. They focus on bringing people in to see the glass house coming in from the city. And we also do some interesting things with the mid-century modern homes every fall with the Historical Society. Is there something that Westport does to bring in tourists, let's say?
No, we do not. We do not target tourists in Westport. It doesn't mean that I don't want tourists, but we do not have a tourist bureau. This office personally reaches out very regularly to both commercial brokers and residential real estate brokers to ensure we know and understand why people are making choices to come here. And then we invest in our infrastructure to make sure we make sure that we are putting Westport's best foot forward to continue to attract businesses and people. And so, but we do not have a tourist bureau here. I work very closely with our chamber. I work very closely with our Westport Downtown Association, and I work really closely with business owners and developers.
And Meredith, there's a ton of stuff that draws people here. The downtown merchants and the chamber. I mean, they have a dog festival. They have an October Westtoberfest, which is like an Oktoberfest. They have a huge arts festival every Memorial Day weekend. The Levitt Pavilion with 55 nights of free entertainment. The restaurants. There's a dog festival. So there's, I don't think there's a concerted tourism bureau, but there's a ton of stuff that draws people here, from, I would say, 15, 20-mile radius.
Yeah, having grown up in New Canaan, I always thought, and John, you can echo your thoughts on this, going to Westport was the cool thing to do when we were younger in New Canaan. Going to the movies there, going shopping, going to restaurants. Certainly now you guys have so many cool things going on. And obviously, it's just got a really, really good vibe that's very different from Greenwich, I think, in terms of offerings for a town that's big.
And if I could add one more thing, Jen mentioned the library earlier. It is a spectacular library. It's the only 5-star library rated by the library people.
New Canaan's right behind you.
New Canaan's got a great one, but the Westport Library has a recording studio. They've got this space in the middle that's like the steps in Times Square. The programming, they do about 2,000 programs a year. It is, and for some reason, I know there's a lot of realtors on here. The realtors don't sell the library as an amenity. And when people come to Westport, they move to Westport, they find out they know about the schools, they know about the recreational opportunities and restaurants. They walk into the library, they say, oh my God, this is like just an added bonus.
I think that the library has evolved its mission. Westport, New Canaan, Darien, all have new libraries, and they all three have evolved their mission from being just about books and collections to being the community hub in so many ways, for the arts, for education, for political discussions and debates and education and panel groups, and every night of the year, all three libraries have something exciting going on. So yeah, I think you're right.
Wilton as well.
And Wilton. I want to play a game now. This is the word association game. I say a word, and then Dan, you say the first word that comes to mind, and then we'll let Jen say the first word that comes to her mind. Does anybody else want to raise their hand? Raise your hand if you also have a word, then you want to blurt. But we'll go Dan, Jen, and then I'll pick another word. How's that? All right. So I'll start off with a lob. Favorite restaurant. First one that comes to mind.
Basso.
Basso. What is that?
It's Mediterranean, it's tapas. And this is really interesting. The owner moved from Norwalk in the middle of the pandemic because he wanted a larger space, and it rocks.
It rocks. Okay, Jen.
Kawani.
And why?
I absolutely love the food.
Okay, is it expensive? Can I afford it?
Yes, you can definitely afford it, and it has a fabulous, very different, very unique menu.
Okay. So my next one is not necessarily restaurant related, but I'm going to say Water View, Westport, Water View. What do you think of first?
The walk from Campo Beach to Old Mill Beach on Hills Point Road.
What am I going to see?
You're going to see Long Island Sound. You're going to see boats. You're going to see this disappearing island, depending on the tides. You're going to see people. You're going to see a ton of people walking past you.
How long a walk is that?
Half mile.
Okay, I could do that.
And then you get to the Old Mill grocery and deli, and you can have great beach food there.
All right, I like that. Okay, go ahead, Jen. Water View.
So I would have said the same, but I won't, because that would be boring. So what I will say is a wonderful water view is paddleboarding on the Saugatuck River.
Paddleboarding on the Saugatuck River.
So our Saugatuck River is tidal. So it's, but it's not as hard to paddleboard on as kind of going out into Long Island Sound. So you can actually do it without fearing that you're going to fall off half the time. And you can paddleboard from basically, you can paddleboard all the way up the river, which the put in is sort of under I-95, and go straight up, and you get to see all sorts of wonderful restaurants and homes on the river. You get a chance to look at our beautiful library from the river, the Levitt Pavilion from the river, and it's just awesome.
Well, Sherwood Island Beach is pretty spectacular too.
Why? What do I see there? It's just a beach, right?
It's beautiful. It's huge. Yeah.
Huge.
It is.
But they also have a wonderful 9/11 memorial at Sherwood Island. But I also like the Inn at Longshore, La Plage. That restaurant's phenomenal, and the views across the sound there are great.
Beautiful. Agreed.
All
What
right.
about, can I say one? Can I ask galleries?
Galleries.
Clarendon Fine Art Gallery, which is the British firm, just opened up on Main Street, and they're doing really well.
Say it again.
Clarendon Fine Art Gallery.
Clarendon Fine Art Gallery. Okay.
Clarendon's fantastic. And the Mocha, which is a museum out right on the Norwalk border in Martha Stewart's former television studio. And it's a great gallery space that, like so many, is always changing.
Can I just divert just a little tangent just before John goes on? Is there a art district, for example? Like, I'm imagining something urban where there's like, on these blocks, this is where all the artists are and all the galleries. Is there anything like that, or is it just spread out?
It's largely spread out. But I will say, so from a standpoint of both what Dan mentioned, MoCA, which is a local nonprofit, we have a lot of art galleries along Main Street and along basically along the Post Road, which runs perpendicular to Main Street. But another thing that we're really, there are a couple other ways to answer that question. We are definitely looking at investing more in public art. It's really important to us. So we have some sculptures in some public spots, but we want to make sure, we want to see a way to kind of increase that. And we're looking at a rehabilitation of some of the public land in downtown, and that will include definitely public art over time. And I'll also say we have a really active artist collective group, and they pop up art shows all over town. They'll do it for just a couple weeks, and they're mostly local artists, and they'll pop up in a little bit of some empty space or space that they use at the Playhouse and other places, and create a little bit of a buzz for a couple weeks and be able to show their art. So we have, it's happening all over the place in Westport. Dan, would you say
Thank
that's
you.
a fair way to describe it?
Yep.
John.
All right, I got another one.
Yeah.
I got a broad one. I want to say sport, because I know a lot of people come to these towns because of their particular sport. Oh, my son plays this, my daughter plays that. But it also occurs to me that these towns are building town pools, tennis courts, pickleball courts as fast as they can. So when you think of sport, are you thinking of high school sports and state championships that we're winning? Or are we thinking about, so what do we think of when we think sport, Dan?
I think all over. You're talking about youth sports. You're talking about state championship girls.
No,
soccer.
you got to give me one word, Dan. I need one word.
Longshore.
Longshore.
I will add a couple of words here. Tennis, golf, pickleball is coming, swimming, ice rink in the winter. So
Sailing.
the word is longshore.
And that's public?
Absolutely.
Yes.
In 1960, it was a failing country club, and the town, in a matter of 19 days, went from fearing that it would be the site of 180 homes built by a developer to purchasing it for $2 million. They did it in 19 days, and it is now town-owned, administered by the Parks and Rec Department, and an absolute town jewel without 180 homes on it.
And Dan, can you help me get a tea time? I don't live in Westport.
Dan, when was that purchase? When did that happen?
1960.
Wow. That's amazing.
I believe it was the first municipally owned country club in the country.
Wow.
Okay, Jen, sport. What are you thinking?
Well, of course, longshore, but again, I'll pivot and highlight something else because I am incredibly proud of our youth sports programs here in Westport. I think, you know, whatever your child may or may not want to play, you can find it here in Westport. Everything under the sun. And I think our community prioritizes kids. We prioritize the education of our kids, and we prioritize opportunity for our kids, and that includes youth sports. So I'm a retired rec soccer coach. My kids are all much better at soccer than I am now, so I had to retire. And Dan is a retired head coach of our varsity boys team at Staples for years, and they won many accolades under Dan's coaching leadership. So you're talking to a real coach. I'm putting the, because that's where you are, Dan, and then just a pretend coach here. But we both love our youth sports.
Dan was a soccer coach?
Soccer coach.
Yeah.
Varsity boys.
Staples High School, but both of us have forgotten to mention the Saugatuck Rowing Club, which is right on the river, and they've got youth programs and men's and women's rowing programs, but they draw from a huge area. So it's Westport kids, and it's ironically owned by the father of the Winklevoss twins, the famous rowers and famous for other things.
I think the other thing, not sports related, but Staples Players at Staples, the theater program is phenomenal. It's also during the year and also summer, but that attracts a lot of big audiences because the quality of the productions are so high.
That's at the high school itself, and it's high school students.
Right, but then they have a community program during the summer, so from all over the area, kids can participate. And
So we've
it's
mentioned
really
the
very well-
Playhouse, which is professional, and now we've mentioned the students at Staples. What is the Levitt Pavilion? That's something we haven't really talked about. And I know that that's also performing arts of some kind. What's Levitt mean?
So the Levitt Pavilion basically has made a promise to our community and to surrounding communities. Anybody can come to the Levitt to produce over 50 nights of free entertainment outside. Obviously, in inclement weather, we find an indoor space. So there's everything from Wednesday nights is known as family night. So there's everything from sort of family acts all the way through to some big name concerts, as well as through to comedy and everything in between. And it's free. People either enjoy our restaurants before the start of the evening entertainment, or they bring their own cooler, or they enjoy some food provided at the Levitt Pavilion. And it's fabulous. It's right on the riverbank. It was redone. The pavilion was redone. Oh gosh, Dan, help me. I want to say 2013-ish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been relatively newly redone. And it's something we are very, very proud of here in Westport. And it really draws people to our downtown area. It really does. It's a draw.
Once a year, they have a benefit with a big name. They've had Cyndi Lauper,
Welcome
John
to
Fogerty,
Diamond.
Willie Nelson, the Beach
Yep.
Boys, Chuck Berry, Smokey Robinson, and my favorite, Buckwheat Zydeco.
Wow. Okay.
Great.
So I
great
have
asset.
either one or two more of these. I was going to say hidden secret. Have you got a hidden secret about Westport that I need to know? Give me that hidden secret, Dan. You're the journalist turning over rocks.
Askins Preserve, right off South Campo Road, 16 acres. There's probably a dozen parks in Westport, and this one administered by the Aspetuck Land Trust. Very few people know about it, but it's an oasis. It's a hidden gem.
Okay, Jen. Hidden secret.
Bikini Island.
Ooh.
It's an island off the coast of Westport that is it's town owned, town run. It is a wonderful place to paddle out to or to motorboat out to. And there's nothing on Bikini Island. It's completely undeveloped. We have a couple of campsites where you can reserve and spend the night, but it's there's absolutely no development out there. It's also, there's a cove in Bikini Island where a lot of boaters do pull in to swim and to relax and tie up with other boaters and have a good time. And then, like I said, we aren't a motorboat family. We're a paddleboard and a canoe and kayak family. So it's well within the distance that you can comfortably paddle out in on one of those, and enjoy a couple hours of really wonderful, peaceful, beautiful, natural beauty.
All right. I'm going to make you all blush now, right? Because that's what I do.
Oh, no.
I'm going to close it out with romantic date. Like, where do you go with the romantic date? And it occurred to me when you said Bikini Island, that sounds pretty good for a romantic date.
Well, now
But
you're
my
assuming-
date probably wants to be fed and probably wants to have a glass of wine. So give me some ideas for a romantic date.
Well, when
Yeah.
we were in high school, we would go out to Campo Beach at night, and I'm sure people still do, but even right at sunset, South Beach at Campo Beach, the sunsets, there's tons of people around, but you can feel like you're alone.
Right.
So now, John, you're asking that question, assuming that I have any time to see my husband while doing his job.
There is that. Yes.
There's that problem. This is a 24/7 job. But anyway, and this one I'm completely with Dan at Campo Beach.
Okay. Because
Oh,
it's
that's
funny because when you're the first selectman I'm imagining that there's probably not too many places you can go to in Westport to get away. You might actually have to leave town on a romantic date.
I think so too. It's a very good point. Although I would say Dan probably has more of a problem with that than me. Everybody knows Dan.
It's a good problem. It's a great problem to have.
It's a great problem to have.
Final thoughts, Roberto. We got a few seconds left.
I think
What'd you learn?
it's an amazing. It's got a little bit of everything. It's a hybrid of so much, and I think it's an amazing place to go. And I have many clients that actually have places there, so it's impressive. I have to visit.
Amy?
I need to pass New Canaan and
Yeah.
Although I do not live in Westport anymore, I lived there in the 80s. My husband grew up in Westport, so it's near and dear to my heart. Couldn't afford to buy there, but I live next door in Southport, so I can come over whenever I want.
Well, please do, Amy and Roberto. If you come up here, make sure you look. Definitely make sure you look up me and Dan. We'd love to take you around.
on
Good town.
Campo Beach. I'll see you there.
Yes, he is there. Make sure you get in.
Thank you both so much. This is a great
Thank you.
show, and I hope to see you both soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All clear.
Skipper,
Great
we'll
job
see you.
today, everyone. Take
Thanks,
care. Have a
Andrew.
great weekend. We'll see you next time.
Excellent.
care.
Thanks. Bye.